All right, today we're tearing into the story of a band that's basically written the book on punk rock survival for almost half a century, Social Distortion.
This right here is Social Distortion. And look, if you've ever been lucky enough to see them live, you know this picture captures that raw, no apologies energy they've been bringing to the stage since 1978.
Their story is just one of incredible staying power. I mean, we're talking about a band that has watched musical trends come and go, faced absolutely profound personal loss, and battled the kind of demons that have just completely wiped other bands off the map.
And that's really the big question we're digging into today, isn't it? How did a bunch of kids from Fullerton, California, manage to build a legacy that's as much about pure, gritty endurance as it is about the music itself?
So, to really get their journey, you gotta start with understanding their pretty unique spot in the whole rock and roll universe. This quote from Stephen Blush just nails it. Think about it. They've got the raw, angry, fast roots of hardcore punk, but they also have the swagger, the storytelling, and just the sheer longevity of rock and roll royalty.
So here's the quick rundown. They got started back in '78, and frontman Mike Ness is the one guy who's been there through it all. Their sound? It went from straight-up hardcore to something called cowpunk, and we'll get into that, and they've sold over 3 million records. Not too shabby for a punk band from OC.
All right, let's jump in the time machine and go all the way back to the beginning, back to the absolute chaos of the late '70s Orange County punk scene. You know, this quote tells you everything about how raw they were. The band's name didn't come from some big intellectual statement. Nope. It came from a piece of gear handed to a teenage Mike Ness who was, let's be honest, still just trying to figure out how to play. That's punk rock right there.
And their whole foundation wasn't built on musical genius. It was built on friendship and just a shared need to make some noise. Ness brought in his buddy Dennis Donnell to play guitar, and when other guys in the band complained that Dennis had to learn from scratch, they got kicked out. The friendship was what mattered.
And that do-it-yourself, figure-it-out spirit, it paid off, big time. By 1983, they dropped Mommy's Little Monster. This album, which they put out on their own label, was their breakthrough. It put them on the map as a real force to be reckoned with in the national punk scene.
But just as they were really starting to take off, the band's momentum just hit a brick wall. And the story took a really dark, really personal turn. This was their absolute lowest point. Mike Ness was spiraling deeper into drug addiction, getting into trouble with the law, and it forced the whole band to just stop. In 1985, they went on hiatus, and for 2 years, nobody knew if Social Distortion would ever exist again, while Ness literally fought for his life.
And this timeline, man, it just lays it all out. You see that huge 5-year gap between their first and second albums? That wasn't some creative choice. That was a fight for survival. But out of that fight came a completely different band, with a new sound and a whole new purpose.
And that new sound was cowpunk. Once he was clean and sober, Ness started weaving in all these American roots influences he loved, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams, the Rolling Stones. This wasn't just them trying a new style. This was the sound of survival. It was punk rock attitude blended with the raw, honest storytelling of country and the grit of the blues.
So this reborn identity, this incredible mix of sounds, is what launched them into the mainstream, and really, at the end of the day, defined their entire legacy. So, in 1990, they released their self-titled album on Epic Records. And just boom, everything changes. Songs like Ball and Chain and Story of My Life became these massive anthems for a whole generation. And their cover of Ring of Fire, that was a direct salute to their heroes. The album went gold.
And they didn't stop there. It wasn't a one-off. Their very next album, Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell, also went gold. That's 2 in a row. It cemented them as one of the most commercially successful punk acts ever.
And of course, you can't talk about Social D without talking about this guy. The skeleton, with his martini glass and cigarette, it became totally synonymous with the band. It's a logo that's every bit as iconic as the Ramones seal or the Misfits skull.
And Mike Ness himself said he just saw the image. It was apparently for a party invitation, and he immediately knew that's it. For him, it represented everything the band was about. That razor-thin line between life and death, and celebrating defiantly right in the face of it all.
But just when the band had hit these incredible new heights, their whole story of survival was tested in the most brutal, devastating way possible. In 2000, Dennis Donnell, Ness's high school friend, the guy who learned guitar just so he could be in his buddy's band, died suddenly. And just like that, the heart of the band was gone.
And this brings us to the final chapter of their story, and maybe the most telling one. It's about what you do after you've already survived the absolute unthinkable.
After Dennis's death, Mike Ness made the choice to carry on.
The band kept touring, relentlessly. But the fight, it seems, never really ends. In 2023, Ness announced he'd been diagnosed with cancer, putting everything on hold yet again. And still, true to form, he's promised to recover and to finish the new album they were working on.
You know, when you look at a picture like this, you see so much more than just a band. You see a story etched into leather jackets and old cars, a story of fighting, of falling down, and of getting back up, again and again and again.
Which brings us right back to that central question. For Social Distortion, what does it actually mean to endure? Well, it seems to mean turning your pain into power, turning addiction into anthems, and turning tragedy into a testament. It's the story of their lives, and they're still writing it.